Sonic Battle was a Game Boy Advance game released by Sega in 2002. It is a side game where Sonic and his friends beat the shit out of each other. It includes several characters that can be fun to play, and Amy Rose. I'll be doing something slightly different in this review because I'm a drama bitch. I will review this game in order of the main characters of each chapter, along with a tier list that will note each character based on how I feel they are as fighters, because spoiler alert, this is a fighting game. There will be some light spoilers for the story, because there is one, especially points where there are walls for players. This should be noted, because there are a few. That said, there is one character I won't be ranking, that is the Gizoid. The Gizoid. Named Emerald. Emerald is the kind of surrogate character and can copy moves from other characters. He's basically every ranking. He also has a general arc in the game that I'll talk about a little bit at the end, but it's not super important in the context here, not to mention its massive spoilers. Sonic is the literal introduction chapter, so for the most part it is easy, but sets the groundwork for the game ahead. This includes meeting Emerald and all the basic story structure. Sonic is the most basic character that everyone else is in some form or another a deviation away from. He's speedy with a decent punch but nothing extreme. The game functions itself is there's an A and B button for jumping and hitting, up attack, your general slam, it's a 1-2-3 combo. You also get special moves. You decide your special moves at the beginning of each match along with your death. The one you don't pick is an automatic block against another special move. So for example, if you decide not to take the bomb, you are immune to any bomb special attacks. It's useful, there's a little bit of strategy to it, which is helpful. Now, deviating from that, because this is kind of important, the first wall of the game happens in that very end of the chapter, where Emerald faces Knuckles for the first time. There's me for the first time. Especially if this is your first time, you are highly outmatched, and you kind of have to resort to some hard cheesing. There is a training ground nearby specifically to fight Sonic and Tails, in order to, one, increase the number of points that Emerald can use in order to get his abilities, but also to get more abilities, so you just don't have Sonic's run and Tails' jump. You can actually do a little bit of damage. Overall, I give Sonic like a flat C. He's nothing terrible, but nothing more than the standard. He does have decent speed, but he doesn't have anything that's exceptional. The next chapter is Tails, and he's really the first jump up. He's slightly slower than Sonic, but he has a way more air maneuverability and finishers and upper attacks and basically everything else. He's great. He's great. A little annoying in the story, but he's great. With a bit of quirkiness, but he's great. However, his most significant upgrade to Sonic is his special attacks. Tails has a massive upgrade from Sonic for these. With slight improvements in others, he's an A rank when it comes to being a fighter. In his story, the chapter mostly confirms suspicions about Emerald and expands the world slightly. You go into the city. Ooh. Nothing too extreme, but establishes a norm is not bad for any story. You get a pattern before you break it. I should also mention, you upgrade Emerald by going into the select menu and you can decide which moves to make. You have a certain amount of points that you can use, which usually upgrade by 1 or 2 with each fight, although later on they get more, but you only have a certain amount, so you have to be economical until a certain point. Keep in mind, you can replay, and as such, increase not only the amount of moves he gets, but also the amount of points he has. So you can make an absolute motherfucking beast, so just keep that in mind. The following story is Rouge, and she's interesting both in the case of a fighter and as a story. She could probably be classified as the tritagonist of the story, and is usually like somewhat involved in nearly every chapter, usually present, and giving some level of exposition. This part of the story is selfish on her part, but very intriguing for her. We normally see Rouge in the context of other people, usually Sonic and every once in a while Shadow. So it's interesting to see her as just herself, to see how she acts and operates. Now, as a fighter, there are really two forms of her. There's the player and then there's the AI. This is mainly due to her gimmick of sustained flight. She can stay for a long time in the air and has high levels of maneuverability with a decent ground game, but she's really great in the air, which means that she's a B rank. Great. However, the AI is very basic, which, makes sense. It's an early 2000s Game Boy game, which is most apparent with Rouge. When you get to Rouge in the air with the AI Rouge, or any of her counterparts, we'll talk about that later, she might make one attack and just float down, making her a super easy fucking target, especially to juggle. Especially true if you hit someone in the air, because if you hit them in the air, they bounce up slightly, and because of Rouge's just floatingness, due to her gimmick, she just stays there, so she's such an easy target, which kinda sucks. But if the player is controlling her, she's great. She's very good. The following story is Knuckles. Knuckles is a stronger and slightly slower version of Sonic, and his attacks are very straightforward, with not much to slide by it. The exception is his special attacks, which can be trickier than at face value. His downsides are not enough to really stop Knuckles from getting at least D. I would say it really matches him. Overall, he's a very straightforward, hard-headed guy, but has a bit of depth to him. Look, motherfucker can go underground and then pop the fuck back up and then summon rocks from the air. Don't fuck with him. As I was saying, the story's actually solid for him as well. It's probably the most full chapter besides one when it comes to a singular chapter arc. It primarily focuses on that arc of respect from Knuckles to Emerald. It also helps to give Emerald to be more than just a potential Sonic mini-me. However, I would be doing bad at this whole review thing if it didn't mention for the fact that there's an annoying motherfucking wall with Knuckles. There's also an annoying wall with Rouge, but truth of the matter is, you just really run around for a solid minute. It can be stress-inducing, but I wouldn't call it the worst. But I call this part the worst. Partially because of how the game is made. At one point, Knuckles will be searching for Emerald, because Emerald split off for some fucking reasons because he has the brain of a 2-year-old. And you have to fight AIs 2v1, and they're generally more aggressive. This is not helped by the game loving to double up the amount of encounters. I'll talk about that right now. Most of the time when you fight one time, you'll be fighting a second time with double the amount of fucking lives. It is padding, with 90% of the encounters happening with this, making the game longer without it being engaging. So, speaking of fun without being engaging, Amy Rose. Her story can be summarized as such. Being obsessed with Sonic, she does this so goddamn much that she convinced herself that Emerald is a practice child for her and Sonic. It is fucking weird, which is a shame because this is so early 2000s. Like, really, it is an early 2000s girl hyper obsessed. Because she's pink, she must only care about love, and that's it. It does not help that as a fighter, she sucked. She is weaker and less mobile than Sonic. She has no real upgrades except for a few moves that hit slightly harder, her spinning hammer move, which I'll give her that, it's pretty cool. So being a worse version of Sonic just makes her D. The only good thing to come out of the Amy chapter was Cream. Speaking of Cream, she's next, and that bitch is goated with the sauce. Her main combo is not only strong, she has combined it with the best fucking recovery in the game. I should mention recoveries as one of the moves. It's very important. See, when you recover, there are two bars. There's the blue bar and the green bar. Blue bar is your health. Green bar is your special move. If you get it full and you start, becoming a fucking, an epileptic seizure on a grayscale, that means that your next special move, if it's not automatically blocked, will one-hit KO somebody. And she can fucking ramp that shit up. Combine that with a very strong game. Her only real downside being that she has a really shitty dash and air dash. She's very good. She's a great fighter. Also helps, her chapter is fucking goated as well. It's so goated, it's basically the entire fucking dynamic regarding Emerald outside of this game. I'll talk about that near the end, because it is kind of fucking wild when you consider everything. So, this chapter itself, it takes place entirely in the Gimme Shelter as a dynamic that compares and contrasts Cream with Emerald, along with basically concluding Gamma's story in this game. It's a great chapter, and it just does a lot with the little time it has. It's also a great farming area, TLDR. There's a little bit of a wall, but nothing too hard. Like I said, Cream, the fighter, gets an A. Easy A. There's only one stronger fighter, and that bitch is Shadow. That's right, Shadow is the second to last chapter, and he's S rank. Period. Fast, strong, versatile, decent specials. The only real downside is that his air dash attack, if an opponent's standing still, it'll go right over them. That's really his only downside. That's it. That is it. That is his only downside. In the game, where there's a decent amount of moving parts. That's it. He's great. There's a reason he only shows up like 4 times beforehand. His chapter, on the other hand, is a bit more fundamental. It's just a really last hurrah before Emerald's chapter. But as the last part, we can really talk about the padding. Like, I really want to make this clear. Most fights will be done twice, once with a 5 stock and then a second time with a 10 stock. It is unnecessary and is an excuse to extend the game's length. It really hurts the game. It honestly does. Instead of being a quick and easy fix, it is annoying and tiring. But before I really conclude some stuff, there are 2 more fighters left in this game. The first one I talked about a little bit. Gamma. Gamma is his own separate fighter in this game. He is strong but very slow and easy to maneuver around. His combos are also slow, that you can escape or even block mid-combo. That said, motherfucker hits you like a brick wall, and when he dies, he explodes. C tier. The second other character is one that only shows up in the last chapter, and that's Chaos. He is an intense fighter. He hits like a motherfucker, but is slower than molasses in the Canadian tundra. As such, he's easy to maneuver around, and it's really a shame. They come super late in the game, and they might as well just not be there. They're not the worst, but they're D tier. I should also mention that there's a lot of what's called Phi clones. They basically look like Emerald, but they have the fighting styles of other characters in the game, minus Chaos. So just keep that in mind. They're not really made to be pointed out. You don't get anything from them except points. And Emerald Shards. That feels like that should be a bigger problem, that they broke up Emeralds into Shards. But they don't. Anyway, the game ends with the Emerald chapter. Once the opening dialogue ends, you can just point over to the Death Egg spoilers and go in. My advice is pretty simple. Don't do it! For the love of all that is holy and Jesus himself. You know what? Fuck that. Not even Jesus himself. Jesus and Mary and Magdalene and whoever the fuck is rest of the Bible canon. The Bible fanfic-averse. It is awful for several reasons. Firstly, once you go in, you can't go out. Now, all you need to do in this chapter is to go into Death Egg and beat Eggman. But you can go around and fight people in the various areas of games. Do that. Period. Do that until you're comfortable and have a complete set. Because the second reason is the real reason why. More than anything else, is that you have 2 fights left. That is Eggman and Emerald himself. Spoilers again. Both are hard, which is fine. But Eggman specifically is unnecessarily complicated in the dumbest way possible. It is so poorly optimized and designed that I'm convinced that it was never tested. What is worse, you have to do it twice. It is undoubtedly one of the worst boss fights I have ever fucking faced. Like, the following Emerald fight's brutal, but it feels a lot more fair, especially compared to Eggman. It is awful. It soured the entire game for me. Like, I really can't describe it other than what the fuckery. I had to do some hardcore cheese. If I cheesed any goddamn more, I turn into a fucking cow. Ultimately, Snape kills Dumbledore and realizes he was dead the entire time. Rosebud. Overall, the game has decent fighting, but has unnecessary padding to go along with it. There's some overall delightful moments, but for the most part, mid. Honestly, the main highlight wasn't the fighting. Instead, it was seeing most of these characters outside the context of Sonic, minus Amy. That's generally missing in most Sonic games. Like, most of them are viewed from the viewpoint of Sonic of some way, either through his journey or through his interactions. Every once in a while I get like a Shadow game where it's a bit different, or Sonic Heroes, but not really. So it's very good to see these characters with their personality, and it's not just bouncing off of Sonic. You could argue it kinda is with Emerald, but Emerald's also enough of his own different person in a blank fucking void that it works. And that's something that was generally missing from Sonic games for a long time. Because these characters have a lot of personality to them. They had a lot of personality back then and now. So, like, that was a decent reason to get the game, if nothing else. Well, until this year. On April 1st of 2023, Sega surprisingly dropped a Sonic visual novel called The Murder of Sonic the Hedgehog. Everyone liked that. But it turned out that it wasn't just a funny little joke on the social media team. It was real, and more importantly, free. And you could play it. So, just a TLDR to avoid spoilers. You spend most of the time not with Sonic, as he is dealing with his writer's block preventing him from finishing his novel. So instead, you spend most of the time with the Sonic crew. In this case, and it's on the fucking cover, so you don't have to worry about it. Tails, Amy, Knuckles, Victor, Espio, Rouge, Blaze, and Shadow. In an environment that's pretty low-key and chill for the most part. And all the characters are engaging. The writing is great. And the visuals are just, so charming. There are a few mini games where you have like an auto runner, but they're like moderate, they're not too hard. The last few have an increase in difficulty, but nothing that really can't be overcome, and there's no life system, so you don't have to worry. These mini games also are not very long, so if you screw one up, it just reboots it pretty quickly. Its main issue is like the odd angle that it runs on, but once you get over that problem, like you're fine. But more importantly, the main recommendation I can give for Sonic Battle vanishes with this game. The characters are a plus if you didn't want to see them with Sonic, but Murder has more character, it's easier to access, and it's free, and this visual novel is also on Steam. There is a future for both types of these games, but Sega will only pick one, and that one is pretty glaringly obvious. A Murder of Sonic the Hedgehog sequel can be done with Tails as the lead, easily, and the unnamed character that you play as, the self-insert OC, who keeps goo with them and loves looking at the trash. That's more character than most people get. I'd imagine it'd be very Sherlock Holmes Dr. Watson situation like it was in the game. You'd probably keep a similar format, expand the area and characters, and add multiple routes in the game and multiple endings. Give it a bit more strength to it. Double the length with more replayability. Keep the same charm and character writing. Easily be like a $10 game. I would also recommend like only putting a few pre-existing characters in there, like Vanille, Big, Tangled, and with a decent amount of OCs to fill up the group, make things more directional, so to speak. Now, if they would make a fighting game, they shouldn't do Sonic. They just shouldn't. He doesn't really work as a fighting game immediately. Yeah, he does punch and kick, but he's not the person you think of when fighting. I think Knuckles is the best option. He's also leaving the Angel Island more after Frontier, spoilers, so it works. Add in Rouge because their banter's great. Cream and Emerald because he is still around, somehow. And have it against, I don't know, an underground fighting ring with Alpha through Gamma series. We haven't seen them for a while. Why the fuck not? Work on it with team attacks. It can be good. The Murder of Sonic the Hedgehog game is enjoyable, charming, and overall a really fun time. It's a short game. You can complete in like an afternoon. And it can be a fun time. It isn't a particularly deep game, but it's an enjoyable one. And double bonus, it's free! Yay! As of I'm recording this, it's been free. So I would give it like an 8 out of 10. Accessible, enjoyable, free. Yay. Honestly, I can only really recommend Sonic Battle for those that want to play every Sonic game ever, or into fighting side games for mascot characters. But like due to unnecessary padding, there's a few weird walls, and a truly fucking awful ending. Not helped by being basically inaccessible, unless you still have a Game Boy Advance or other methods, not gonna speak on other methods. I would have to give this game like a 5 out of 10. Like there is something good there, but it's just not done well. I mean, there is good. The most specific one is the Cream level, highlighting why Cream and Emerald characters worthy of being around by that time. They're still kind of worthy of being around. In fact, the Cream level is entirely the reason Emerald is still around. Cream is a weird character in Sonic history. She kind of just pops the fuck up with no real fanfare at all. She kind of just shows up in Sonic Advanced and other side games, Sonic Chronicles, and it's just been around. It probably also helps that she showed up in the fucking Sonic Western anime. And they also kind of adapted Sonic Battle there too. And they had it adapted to where Emerald and Cream with the most where Cream is the most important character in that Emerald story, and it makes sense. They're polar opposites, but in a fun way. Cream is young, loving, doesn't want to fight, but can fight. Emerald, however, is cold, machine, and can fight, but is trying to learn humanity, and Cream exudes that. Probably more than any other character, she's an innocent that can do extraordinary. Unlike most of the other characters in Sonic, they're extraordinary that are just really fun and charming and awesome. Cream is the only one that's way more grounded. And it works. Emerald is still fucking around even though in this game he dies. Spoilers. So it makes complete sense why they're still around, especially when he is paired with her. The latest we've seen of them was in the I was about to say Archie comics. Those don't exist anymore because of legal reasons. In the IDW comic, especially the truly fantastic Metal Virus saga, they're great. They are honestly amazing characters in there as well. And it all started in Sonic Battle of all places. It's really just a shame, now that I think about it, that Cream and Emerald are just not in more of the mainline Sonic games. I guess it's harder because Cream is always written to be a very young child, while Tails is given like young teenager energy that has not reached that point where he's starting to rebel, but you know, he's just on that cusp of it, and we all know it. While Sonic is clearly his older brother that everyone simultaneously likes and has to deal with his shit over. But to really conclude things for Sonic Battle, something could have been made great with this game, but like, in the end, this is a battle that Sonic and his friends just lost.